tricky, ruthless stuff, that Black Ice. A perfectly safe neighborhood can be suddenly terrorized by the appearance of black ice.
I do not like the deer. I'm sick of it. They're taking over. They're like rats. They're destroying the ecosystem. I see a dead deer on the side of the road. I think to myself, that's a start.
Get Out is the perfect horror movie. There are so many captivating elements that add to the immersion. Expert cinematography, great character building, and loads of subtle imagery. As a genre, horror can evoke a range of emotions, from pure unadulterated fear to genuine sadness and sorrow. Some of the greatest build tension or suspense in unique ways. A Quiet Place is so horrifying because the premise is parallel to real life. Switching between fiction and reality is a mind-boggling experience for the audience. Jordan Peele walks this line with precision and purpose. So what makes Get Out so disturbing? Why do we feel so uncomfortable alongside Daniel Kaluuya? Media has a unique power to psychologically impact our point of view. When a character we empathize with feels an emotion, we can experience a similar sensation. What makes Get Out so scary is that the interactions in this film are ones that black people experience. White people constantly appropriating black culture, fetishizing characteristics of black people instead of appreciating the person for who they are. Even experimentation with black bodies. All these scenes in the movie emulate the experiences of many black Americans. Showcasing racism in Get Out lets the watcher gain more perspective. Not only can we get a better understanding of our shared collective history, but we can realize just how shitty it feels to be tokenized or dehumanized for our appearance. A movie like this can allow us to be more empathetic, which is so important. Understanding the lived experiences of others can help us cultivate greater empathy. Sometimes when watching this movie, it's hard to tell what's real. Everything feels a little off. Camera shots take a little longer than necessary. Awkward interactions take their time. But everything in this movie is by design. So today, I wanted to break down the imagery, history, and psychology in Get Out. This film is so good, you won't be able to say nope if someone asks if you want to watch it. To be clear, I'm as white as the snow, so my experience with racism is almost non-existent. I've taken some sociology and African American studies classes, but my point of view is very limited by my perspective. So if you feel like I got something wrong, or if there's any commentary you wanted to add, I'd love for you to educate me in the comments. So let's jump in. I'm Very Berry. If you enjoyed this video, like and share with your friends. Also, don't forget to hit that sub button and notification bell so you always see my latest content. The movie opens with a black guy walking through a white neighborhood. He feels uncomfortable being in the suburbs, but as we will soon find out, it's for very good reason. Out of nowhere, he's choked out while we hear the song Run Rabbit playing in the background. Starting a movie in this way expertly sets the tone for our expectations. Then we cut to shots of the camera going through a dense forest, giving the audience a sense of time progression, but also setting the stage. We then see the main character's photography. A black guy holding balloons has a horse-like shadow, symbolizing the exploitation of black labor. A picture of a pit bull has an even darker meaning. Racists often use pit bulls as a stand-in for a black person in the form of dog whistling. By using coded language, only certain individuals understand the real conversation being had. The last piece of imagery worth mentioning is this picture, foreshadowing the entire plot right there on the wall. I love all these little details in the environment that help to tell a greater story. While this is a fictional work, the struggles portrayed are very real. The racism that Chris's character endures, or the photos of these lived experiences, aren't fiction. We are then introduced to Chris's girlfriend, Rose. Our hero is uncomfortable that Rose's family doesn't know he's black. She reassures him that things will be a-okay, but nothing could be further from the truth. We hit the road, but things feel a little tense. Something feels off, like when you watch The Shining. Chris calls his buddy Rod to chat for a bit, but out of nowhere, they hit a deer. Unsure of what to do, they call the police. A white officer shows up and starts hassling Chris. Wanting to see his ID for no good reason, Rose shuts down his racism. This is yet another instance of Jordan Peele blurring the line between fiction and reality. Racial profiling is a huge problem that minorities disproportionately face. Wanting to see an ID for no reason, or being questioned about where a person is headed. Showing these moments on screen is so powerful because it demonstrates the lived experiences of others. Portraying the harm that comes from racism can spread awareness to those who had no idea interactions like this take place. After all the craziness, we arrive at the Armitage home. We quickly see that racism is present in this household as well, although not as overt as the officers, just as pernicious and harmful. Rose's dad, Dean, illustrates what I mean. Earlier we talked about how people will use dog whistling to covertly push a political narrative. Dean's speech about the deers is a great example.
Yeah, I do not like the deer. I'm sick of it. They're taking over. They're like rats. They're destroying the ecosystem. I see a dead deer on the side of the road. I think to myself, that's a start.
If we take what Rose's dad says at face value, nothing is wrong with the sentiment. Deers are overpopulating, causing havoc on the environment. But if we contextualize what he is saying now with his future behaviors, things become clear. He's really talking about black people. This speech is especially insidious, considering we know his wife, Missy, knows exactly what he's trying to convey. The Armitage family have explainers for all their strange behaviors. One of their servants, Georgina, starts acting weird. For a moment, it seems like her consciousness drifts away. After she goes to lie down, we meet the final piece of the Armitage puzzle, Jeremy. He gets too drunk at dinner, so he antagonizes Chris. He goes off on a race realism rant before abruptly leaving. Rose gaslights our hero, pretending to be shocked by their racist ways. They go to sleep, and he awakens in the middle of the night feeling restless. He goes outside to sneak a cigarette, but notices that Georgina is acting fucking weird. Then one of the Armitage's servants, Walter, starts sprinting at him. Confused by what he saw, he finds Missy waiting for him in her workroom. She performs hypnosis on him. Recalling his past, we learn more about his character. His mom was hit by a car, but Chris was paralyzed with fear. Using hypnosis, Missy throws our hero into the Sunken Place. Here, he is a prisoner in his mind. Going through all this makes him question reality. Walter confronts him, apologizing for his weird antics the night before. His dialogue sounds especially dated.
One of a kind, top of the line.
Phrases that only a grandpa would use. If you thought things couldn't get worse, wait until you get a load of this party. As Chris and Rose traverse this hellscape, everyone gawks at him. We can't help but feel horrible on his behalf. These interactions are so dehumanizing. Again, we get a little more insight into the lived experiences of many black people, feeling otherized because of the color of one's skin. Although one person at the party takes a genuine interest in Chris. Jim Hudson has a knack for art. He can tell a good photographer a mile away, and he admires our hero. He seems irked out by how everyone else is treating him.
Ignorance. Oh, all of them.
Jim doesn't care about race. He cares about talent. After several horrible conversations, he tries to snap a hidden picture of another black guy at the party who is acting weird. After being photographed, he completely loses it, almost like his true self came back to reality for a moment. Feeling freaked out, Chris and Rose leave to go talk things out. In the meantime, Dean is hosting a bidding war for Chris's body. We can only take a wild guess about who the winner might be. The final act is set in motion. The two return home, but something isn't right. A palpable tension permeates the air. Chris calls Rod and finds out that the black guy at the party has been missing for weeks. Rod's phone dies, but he goes to get help. In a shocking twist, we find out that Rose has some secrets. The supposed black mold in the basement was this family's horrifying truth. They abduct black people and repurpose their bodies for personal gain. Chris begins to understand the gravity of the situation he's in. Missy puts his mind back in the Sunken Place, and we awaken to some shit straight out of The Shining. On a creepy TV set, a man tells Chris that his body will be inhabited by another person. We find out that Georgina and Walter are Rose's grandparents. Then he is put back under. Once he awakens, we see that Jim Hudson is now on the TV. He explains that he doesn't care about anything other than getting a photographer's eye. While this preemptive explanation seems strange, supposedly it helps with the operation. Chris realizes the nervous tic he developed made some cotton come out of the chair. He hides some in his ears and pretends to knock out again. Daniel Kaluuya breaks free and goes on a killing spree. Rose and her grandpa chase him down. He uses the good old camera Sunken Place jutsu, and the real Walter comes too. He shoots Rose and then himself. She makes one last ditch effort, but Chris sees through the ruse instantly. He begins choking Allison Williams. Her face changes to a smile, but our hero stops midway. Then her expression quickly transforms. This scene is important to unpack. The Armitage family think of black people in the worst way possible.
No pussyfooting around, you'd be a fucking beast.
They almost view them as akin to animals.
With your natural gifts and our determination, we could both be part of something greater.
better in body and performance, but without determination. When Rose sees Chris acting violently, she is happy that her assumptions are being validated. Realizing he's giving her what she wants, Chris stops because he understands he's better than this. He can show kindness towards his enemies, unlike his aggressors. In my opinion, Rose's death wasn't her saddest moment. It was seeing that her racism had no bearing in reality. To unpack it out, I think we need to understand the horrifying system the Armitages cultivated. While they might not seem like the brightest, their structure is complex. Each character has a different role and motivation. Jeremy likes the idea of finding someone who can outmatch him strength-wise. Rose is addicted to the allure of seducing unsuspecting victims. Missy likes to mess with people's minds. And Dean loves the idea of the hunt. This sick and twisted family also has rigid roles and structures. Rose is the starting point of contact. When she finds the right person, she brings them back to be sized up by the family. Jeremy inspects their physique and sizes them up. Missy gets into their mind. Dean sits back and enjoys the thrill of it all. In a way, they act like hunters, which will be super important for the next section of this video. So what makes the Armitage family so terrifying? I'd say the scariest thing about them is that most members of the family have real-life counterparts. A lot of the moments in Get Out feel eerily similar to reality. Black men constantly deal with stereotypes about their physique and sexual prowess. The same is true with the sexualization and objectification of black women. I'd say the Armitages are grounded antagonists. The conviction of these characters is unnerving. They do scary shit, but most of the things shown on screen have also happened in the real world. The colonization of black bodies, the objectification and fetishization of black people. Even the brain surgery scene parallels onto phrenology. This outdated and debunked pseudoscience irrevocably harmed black communities. In the past, many believed that black brains and skulls were different. Using this science, white people tried to justify their cruelty. Science is a powerful tool that's granted society so many wonderful gifts, but it's important to recognize the biases in the researchers themselves. Many wanted a reason to justify slavery and the horrible treatment they dished out. So phrenology was the answer they looked for. Get Out's brain surgery scene is so uncomfortable, but we need to see how horrible our history is to fully understand it. The Armitage family can teach us a lot about how racism manifests in the real world. When we operate based on biological assumptions, we can lose touch with reality. Someone who was previously considered human is now a commodity to exploit. Two pieces of imagery are everywhere in Get Out: deers and lions. A deer hits the car. The Armitage's house is littered with deers. Not to mention, Chris uses a deer to enact revenge. As for the lions, we have Missy's chair, which is adorned with lions. There are lion dog statues beneath the fireplace, but the main focus is on this plush, which makes an appearance in several important scenes. So what does the lion and deer imagery symbolize? Well, I believe it signifies the Armitage's beliefs about the racial dynamics at play. This family sees themselves as the lions and the black people as deers. At night, it seems like the lion is keeping watch over Chris, which is an entire microcosm for how he's treated throughout the film. Rose goes out of her way to keep a close eye on him, making sure he never strays too far off the beaten path. Get Out is essentially a big hunt when you think about it. All these lions in sheep's clothing waiting to jump on an unsuspecting victim. Or how about Rose's room? She has her lion plush in the background and her collection of X's on the wall. If we think about this imagery in a different way, we could see this area as a trophy room. She's celebrating her victories by putting them out on display. The arrogance of the Armitage family illustrates their misconceptions. They even have the gall to hang a deer over the pre-op room, mocking their next victim. Their perceived perfection ends up being their downfall. Chris is more than capable. He's smart, has good instincts, and isn't afraid to stand up for himself. Comparing him to a deer is extremely fallacious and harmful. It seems especially symbolic that Chris kills Dean with the deer's head, illustrating that our harmful assumptions will ultimately be our downfall. Jordan Peele is a great director because he tells his story from multiple angles. Rather than give a streamlined experience, he litters the environment with details. Let's look at the scene when he's shaving in the apartment. The stage is set with the kid wearing the mask on the wall, foreshadowing what is to come. Chris begins shaving, putting white on his face, signifying that someone is attempting to take his body. but he cuts himself and stops because Chris's character gets free. Let's take a moment to appreciate the environment that Peele crafted. Besides the hunting imagery, details on the wall also give us greater insight. This poster has two brains being highlighted. Horse imagery everywhere symbolizes the systemic oppression that black people face. Chris picks cotton to free himself from oppression. Even finer details tell us a lot about the characters. Rose seems to fetishize black skin. After she gets her last dopamine hit from Chris, she instantly hops on the web to look up more black people. But while she's doing this, she goes out of her way to separate her Fruit Loops and milk. Now this could be coincidence, but I think it tells a lot about her psychology. She sees black people as lesser, so the idea of mixing color with white makes her uncomfortable. Rose doesn't want to get to know a black person, she merely wants to exploit them. Not to mention, so much imagery represents the real struggles that black people face. The bingo card scene harkens back to the slave trade when auctioning black people was an everyday part of life, or the phrenology imagery we talked about earlier. Even the exploitation of black labor. Jordan Peele has talked about how humans scare him more than anything. When we see a monster in film, we might feel an uncomfortable sensation like fear or disgust. But I don't know anyone who looks like the creature in The Thing. Although, I think many of us have come into contact with someone who acts like Dean or Missy. To me, this is one of the most powerful pieces of imagery. We have a slew of technology and resources at our disposal when creating film. Although, portraying humans in the right way can be just as horrifying as any monster. Using people as the central enemy reminds us of our capacity for harm. We can all act like the Armitage family if we aren't aware of our biases. Thinking about all these components in tandem, we can see how much of the story is told in the world itself. So you may be wondering why I didn't talk about the Sunken Place in the imagery section. For me, the Sunken Place is so complex an idea that it needs its own chapter. In the movie, the Sunken Place is when our conscious mind is forced into our subconscious. Thus, the open space allows for someone else's mind to just plop in, which on its own is horrifying to think about. Trapped in an endless sea of despair, having no freedom or agency in the slightest. But I think the Sunken Place could also be a poignant allegory about the exploitation of black people. Take for example jazz music. White people would go into black bars and nightclubs, pretending to visit in good faith. After copying and rebranding the music, they would sell the work as their own. Many black artists never got credit for the work they poured their hearts into. The same is true when talking about the sexual exploitation of black women. During times of slavery, women and even children were raped. In both these instances, one factor remains consistent. White people were the majority power holders. What could a slave do against their oppressor? What could a talented artist do against the entirety of the white-owned music industry? Many stopped trying to fight back, watching their works and bodily autonomy be stripped from them. The Sunken Place symbolizes the hopeless feeling that comes when your life is taken from you. Watching your remaining happiness be stripped from you. Acting as a passive viewer while others make the decisions at your expense. Think about how entering the Sunken Place works. A sound is played and the person is taken into the depths against their will, completely stripped of their agency. Peele's use of the Sunken Place is once again breaking down the barrier between fiction and reality. I think with this framing, the movie takes on a slightly different meaning. Black culture is constantly stolen and appropriated. Showcasing this suffering through a horror medium demonstrates the pain associated. We can understand how soul-crushing it would feel to have our autonomy stripped from us, to fall into a void where no one can hear our suffering. Jordan Peele did something truly powerful in Get Out. He managed to cultivate an emotion that isn't commonly associated with horror. Horror is a difficult genre to incorporate empathy into, which to be fair, makes a lot of sense. When I go to the carnival, I'm not expecting to take a bite out of cotton candy and see a human corpse in it. Empathizing with the characters in the Attack of the Killer Clowns is difficult. Part of the reason comes from how far removed from reality the premise is. In this movie, intergalactic aliens use shadow hand puppets to eat people. While the idea of killer clowns makes my heart stop, I know it'll probably never happen, but Get Out represents the lived experiences of many marginalized communities. The scariest thing about this movie is that the villains are all humans. At a glance, they look like a standard family, able to completely function and operate in society. But something sinister lies below the surface. Chris's character lets us experience a sensation outside of our own. I haven't had a history of racial discrimination directed towards me, so I can understand the information, but not the experience. But when I see Chris on screen, I'm not facing the racism he is. Although, I get a fuller idea of what the discrimination physically feels like. I cringe so hard at the old white dude saying he loves Tiger Woods. I feel uncomfortable when the lady feels up his arm. These sensations are so important to people like me. Combining information with physical psychological sensations is a power of its own. Not to mention, empathy is a powerful idea to demonstrate in film because we can all relate to someone else's pain. Every character in Get Out is exceptionally well fleshed out to an incredible degree. Chris is a photographer who is shaped by his tragic experiences. His photos usually focus on death and pain. The nervous tic he acquired from his past trauma ultimately saves him. Or how about Rose's grandpa? He was a runner who was beaten by a black guy in the Olympics. Dean tells Chris that he can never let go of the fact that he lost. So he takes a black person's body and sprints as fast as he can, trying to accomplish what he previously couldn't. Like we said earlier, Rose loves the thrill of enrapturing people. Catherine Keener loves to get in someone's head. But to me, one character is extra special. Jim Hudson. Jim serves as both a narrative and commentary tool. Having no sight, his perspective is limited to the aid of his assistant. His interactions with our hero are different from the crowd's. While others fetishize Chris, Jim speaks to him respectfully. If we go based just on the dialogue in the movie, he doesn't seem to be racist. He only wants Chris for his photographer's eyes. He shows the audience that you don't have to be racist to partake in racist systems. This idea might sound paradoxical, but hear me out. Say hypothetically, a restaurant is owned by someone racist. One day, a person eats here knowing the owner is bigoted because the food is less expensive. This customer treats the black employees respectfully and doesn't appear to be racist at all. Even though they ate here for the cheap food, they still partook in harm by helping the racist owner succeed. Jordan Peele's edition of Jim Hudson is so important. Jim isn't racist, but he still perpetuates the racist structure by exploiting Chris. Regardless of his reasoning, black people are the only ones being hurt by the Armitage family. Deconstructing how bigotry can manifest in society helps us be aware of the ways we perpetuate harm. Jordan Peele at his roots is a comedian. Key and Peele was a huge hit on Comedy Central. Some of their best skits analyze race issues in funny yet thought-provoking ways. One of my favorites is the Black Ice short. Key and Peele play a black reporter and weatherman. They relay the information they receive back to a white broadcasting crew. Out of nowhere, the reporters start talking about how dangerous black ice is. The two continue dog whistling about the untrustworthiness of black ice.
Away from an ATM machine when black ice just snuck up on me and practically robbed me of my balance.
While Key and Peele awkwardly defend themselves.
Black ice never asked to be out here. No, it did not.
Even the word choice is intentional. Black eyes, black ice. The humor in this skit makes fun of a very real problem black people face. In Get Out, this exact same sentiment is conveyed, but without the comedy. I love this dichotomy, because it highlights the gravity of this way of thinking. In the Black Ice short, dog whistling is the joke.
Lots of reports of black ice.
Ooh, you gotta watch out for that dangerous black ice.
But Jordan Peele brings us back to reality in Get Out. Let's look at the evolution of Peele's perspective. When Dean talks so hatefully about the deers, we feel unsettled. We can sense the vitriol that's pouring out of him as he speaks. When we realize he's talking in coded language, every character becomes more sinister in nature. The same is true about the reporters. When the skit starts, we laugh at the broadcaster's bigoted comments. But towards the end, we can see that the characters are starting to get offended. Comedy is a powerful tool that can bring us together. Everyone loves to laugh and have a good time, but humor can also be used to convey harsh truths about the world. We might guffaw at black ice, but we need films like Get Out as a media counterbalance. It's important to remember that these experiences aren't jokes to the ones on the receiving end. Jordan Peele is a master at building stories in comprehensive ways. Representing the lived experiences of everyone in media is so important, especially for marginalized communities. We need to be more aware of social issues so we can avoid interactions like the ones in this movie. Understanding our shared collective history allows us to empathize with one another on a deeper level. We need more horror movies like this. that build great suspense, but also empathy in such unique and thought-provoking ways. What did you think about Get Out? Have you seen the trailer for Nope? What are your thoughts on Jordan Peele's use of lived experiences in media? I'd love to hear from you.